Welcome to The State of Us. Real people with honest opinions and the future of responsible media. Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
Presidential hopefuls are spending heavily to communicate with voters. And in the Democratic field, they're spending particularly heavily in order to secure small dollar donors. Now, that seems like a bit of an oxymoron. Why would you spend heavily, upwards of $279 per donation? So think about it, right? I get Lance to be a small dollar donor for me. He donates $1, or maybe he's real generous and gives us $5 or $10. But it cost me $279 to acquire his $5. Now, something doesn't seem quite right about that. Why would I do something like that? Well, President Donald Trump spent $4.8 million from May 26th to August 23rd of this year on Facebook ads. That's just Facebook, $4.8 million. He was followed up by Tom Steyer with $3.9 million. For those of you that don't know, that's a gentleman running for the Democratic nomination. Kristen Gillibrand, who is out of the race now. Bernie Sanders at $1.7 million, tied with Mayor Pete Buttigieg at $1.7 million. So, why are Democrats spending so much money on small dollar donors? And why do you care? Well, you care about this spending as a whole because there's a lot of things that go into it. Can a nobody really win the presidency, or do you have to be a wealthy person in order to win? That's part of what we're going to be looking at, but we're also going to examine, is this just a trend, this spending on social media, Facebook, etc., these small dollar donors? And is this accomplishing what the DNC's after, this whole idea of small dollar donors as one of the qualifications for debate? Those are some of the questions we'll be looking at and what the best alternative is. But, of course, we couldn't begin this conversation without
your friendly redneck liberal, Lance Jackson.
Hey, we got to do an acronym show. The SDD by the DNS.
Yeah?
Or DNC.
DNC.
Sorry.
The
I don't know. See, I hate acronyms.
Small dollar donors.
Small dollar donors. You kept saying small dollar donors. And what I wrote down in my little sketchbook was SDD.
SDD by the DNC?
That's it.
Okay.
Sounds like a rap song.
Yeah? I don't know. Caleb listens to that type of stuff. What do you think?
Oh, that was DMC. Never mind.
Yeah, Run DMC.
Run DMC.
Back
That's
in
from
the
my
90s,
day.
right?
That's my day,
I was
man.
in the 90s. That's some of the best
Do you
hip-hop was
listen
in
to
the 90s.
modern rap?
Yes, but I despise it.
Oh.
I listen to
But
it.
you listen
I listen
to it.
to No. Because here's the thing.
I've heard him roll up in his car,
I listen
Lance.
to the instrumentals. Because the instrumental, the background track is awesome. I can't understand a lick of what they're saying on there. Okay. Then best rap came from the 90s. Best rap came from the 90s.
Okay. All right. Now that you've angered probably our entire audience.
Save the people that actually agree with me, which is all three of you. Thank you.
Facebook. Well, no.
But no, this Facebook, let's get back here now. Facebook, I was just saying, as an
See
educator.
what you did?
As a former educator, I just totally dislike acronyms, but that's what popped into my head. So SDD for the DNC.
With your ADD.
With ADD.
That's why we arrived at where we are.
But it's absurd. And I think it's something that needs to be talked about, though. The amount of spending that's going on just so you can get on stage in a debate.
So
it's unreal.
So let's talk about a little bit here, some detail. But the question that we're going to try to answer in this first bit here is this just a trend? This is a question that Lance kind of posed before the show, so we'll give credit where credit's due. Whether or not he's got an answer for it, that's what we'll figure out here in a second. The Wall Street Journal article that we're referencing can be found at thestateofus.org, and it's entitled Election Fever Lifts Facebook Prices. It's got some nice charts. So if you're like me, I don't know, are these
of course
charts or graphs? Maybe our producer can figure out if there's an actual dictionary difference between the two. I'd hate to be calling them the wrong thing. In general, because Facebook's ad systems are auction-based, higher demand for ad space drives up prices, whether measured in cost per ad or the cost to persuade a person to sign up for an email list or make a donation. So the reason that prices are skyrocketing is, for those of you that don't know, the DNC has a donor threshold that is a requirement in order to be on stage at a Democratic debate. I'm not sure why they say on stage at a Democratic debate, because I don't think the other ones are behind stage. So interesting phraseology by them there. But either way.
You could probably hold your own debate. It just might not be covered by national media.
Well, sure. Yeah, you can do whatever you want.
Because like you pointed out, the DNC is just an organization.
Yeah.
You can go off and have your own debate somewhere else if you can.
Nobody's preventing you from doing your own debate.
Can you have a one-person debate? Like have a moderator who just asks you questions?
Yeah, you can debate yourself.
And then, okay.
Right. Isn't that what happens with your voices all the time?
No, those are real.
Okay. Well, I didn't say they weren't real.
The voices in my head are real.
Yeah, but you're debating yourself.
Oh, of course.
They're just different.
On a daily basis.
Okay. So the reason that ad prices are being driven up by Facebook is because more people are requesting this type of ad.
Which I like, because that's capitalism.
Yes.
Supply and demand, there we go, free market. I like that concept. I just don't like it in how much people are spending to raise money to be on a debate. But I do like that part of, I like something on Facebook. Can you believe that?
Yeah.
I don't have Facebook, but
That's right.
I like that business
and that's
situation.
That's a simplification of how it operates. But generally speaking, for example, Lance, one of the things you can do is set a maximum bid. What is the most that Lance is willing to pay to serve this ad to somebody?
I've done that for my memorabilia on eBay. Oh,
okay.
Yeah. I know how that works.
Okay, you got the maximum.
I know how that works.
Okay.
Yeah.
But generally that's how the system works. So when you have this requirement and there's all these Democratic presidential candidates who look at being on the debate stage as critical to having any shot at the nomination, therefore they spend their money heavily to acquire donors, regardless of what they donate, because there's so many ads, and I've seen them on Facebook. They've served them to me saying, the DNC has this threshold, so I need you to chip in just $1 so that I can be on the stage. And they've shown those ads to me numerous times, and I've never donated. So, how much are they spending in some cases to show those ads to people? And aside from the science telling us you got to show them to people like at least 7 times before they're likely to take action anyway. And that varies some, based on, for some types of ads, you don't have to pay unless people take a certain action. So that's you're not always paying for that, but that's part of why the price is so high. To give some reference, the prices were typically about $5 to $9 to secure a donation or an email sign up prior to this kind of rush leading up to the last round of debates. So a lot of these numbers were relative to the last set of debates. But again, you're seeing this Facebook ad prices being lifted again as we approach the next round of debates for everybody that's trying to make that threshold, and also for the next, fundraising deadline for the FEC, because one of the things that is often looked at by the mainstream media for viability of a candidate is how was their fundraising this last quarter. In other words, if I only raised $1 million, you're not really in the race. If you raise $25 million, then you're getting some headlines and, oh, look how much money they're raising.
But as you said, the question here is this going to continue?
This spending on Facebook.
In its current format, yeah.
What do you think the answer is?
I don't know. I brought it up because Barack Obama did so well with social media. That was, at that time we were still all supposedly listening to the TV and the radio and everything else. And he went on social media and did extremely well. So then that became all the rage. And we're seeing it now. I wondering out loud, is it at its apex? Is this the highest it's ever going to go as far as thinking this is the way to get elected, or will it die out and something new comes in?
So you're kind of unsure.
Yeah, I guess I have to say, though, with all the people on social media, that some form of social media platform would probably take its place.
Yeah.
I don't see that we can get away from the whole social media thing, because this is the way to directly get to the people that you want to get to. Whereas if you put a TV commercial or a radio ad on, you're very limited with your audience. With social media, you can direct your money exactly where you want it, to the people that you want it to go to. So it might not be Facebook, but it's probably going to be some kind of social media issue.
Here's my analysis, Lance, of the Facebook situation.
I hate to admit that. I don't like that, but I think that's what it's going to be.
I think you're right that if it's not Facebook, it'll be something else online, some sort of digital media, social media type platform. The thing, though, that's important to keep in mind with Facebook, one of the reasons that it takes the cake right now for political ad spending and not someplace like Snapchat, Instagram, Twitter, these places that cool kids like Caleb, the places they use, a couple reasons. One is Facebook's audience on a worldwide scale just is so far in front of any other social network that just from a practicality standpoint, I think it's something like, we looked it up, remember? It was something like 80% of Americans have a Facebook profile. I mean, it was crazy, even the likes of somebody like Caleb, right, who says it's not cool. Even people in my generation who say Facebook's not cool. I catch them all the time on Facebook. Oh, it's not cool. Well, then why are you spending as much time there as you are in these other places? Oh, well, I just checking in on, yeah. But the whole point is that's what counts, is where do you spend your time and are you on the platform? So big number one is Facebook has at the moment such a large audience, and it captures such a huge percentage of the population that it's just a practical place to do it because you can speak to so many people in a single platform.
Well, look at your chart. The person who spent the most on advertising on Facebook in the last quarter was the current president, who is basically, I know there are 3 people that are running against him who have announced a candidacy, announced that they're running against him, but he's the biggest spender. So he is understanding, as he's out there trying to collect money for his reelection campaign, that this is the way to go.
And that was the case in 2016 too.
The Democrats are doing it because they're trying to get small donors so that they can get on stage for the debate. The president's just using Facebook to get his message out and to raise money to hopefully win reelection.
Yep.
And he's spending even more than the Democrats are.
It's more of a communication effort for him.
Yes.
He doesn't need a donor threshold. He's the incumbent sitting president, so he'll be on the debate stage if the RNC decides. I don't know. I don't think we've heard that yet, if they're actually going to do a debate or not. They've been kind of hush-hush from what I know. If you know something we don't, let us know. So is this just a trend? No, I don't think so. I think it kind of started that way with Obama. But I think that social media has embedded itself, might be a better word, into the fabric of society. So as long as that's the case, much like TV before it, the radio before that, newspapers before that, as long as that's the main platform and the most effective dollar-for-dollar way to reach the most amount of people, and now with the advanced targeting and analytics that are possible, no, I don't think this is a trend. I think this is something we have to talk about seriously because it's not just going to go away on its own. So that's part of why we've done some coverage on it. What we're going to look at next is, does this accomplish, i.e. this donor threshold, what the DNC is after? And of course, in order to answer that, we'll have to first answer, what is the DNC trying to accomplish here? What is their goal with this donor threshold? And then we can talk about if they're accomplishing that or not. But before we do that, Lance, it's important we take just a moment and remind people what we're trying to do here on The State of Us.
Well, we're trying to educate people by providing honest, open, and respectful conversations.
So we're going to look at, is the DNC accomplishing its goal? What is its goal? And we're going to get an answer to the difference between a chart and a graph. But before all of that happens, we're going to take just a brief break, and we'll be right back.
We are The State of Us. Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
Presidential hopefuls are spending heavily to communicate with voters. We've looked at whether or not this is just a trend. Lance and I's somewhat resounding answer is no, it's not just a trend. And what we mean by that is it's not a trend that this spending is so heavy on Facebook, i.e. social media, because even if it's not Facebook, somebody else will probably take Facebook's place. So digital media is going to be around for a while. What we're looking at next is, does this donor threshold that the DNC keeps creating really accomplish what the DNC's after? But before we answer that, I know you've been dying to find out the difference between a chart and a graph, your tidbit for today. What we learned over the break is that all graphs are charts, but not all charts are graphs. In other words, a graph is a type of chart. And what makes a graph a graph? And here's the big key that I kind of missed when Caleb was telling me about it over break, is it's a diagram showing a relation between different quantities, okay? Typically two different things, but could be more. And each are measured along a pair of axes at a right angle. So that's the big difference. In other words, there has to be two axes, at least an X and a Y, in order for it to be a graph.
I knew I should have taken Algebra 2.
So, when we see these, we get some of these charts that have these like circle bubbles, that measure different things. Or when we look at like a chart of the United States with different states colored in, those are not graphs. Those are only charts.
Gotcha.
But what we're looking at today,
I'll believe you.
They're graphs.
Okay.
They're graphs.
I totally believe you. Take your word for it. I just know when I see them.
I like all charts.
When I see them, I hand
Charts
you the
are
article because I know you're interested.
Yes.
I just would rather read the words.
Okay. So there you go. Everybody was dying to find out the difference.
Now the question, the age-old question.
That's right.
Which came first, the graph or the chart?
The chart
has been answered by the chart.
Well,
because a graph is a specific type of chart.
That's right.
Is what you're trying to tell me. Is that what I learned?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, the second thing you said, that a graph is a type of chart. All charts.
So charts had to come first.
All graphs are charts.
Or did graphs come first?
Well, that we don't know.
See,
that we can't
it's kind of
answer.
like the chicken and the egg, right?
That's right.
The state of us answering only the most important questions.
That's right.
That's right.
Charts or graphs?
Charts or graphs. Okay.
So what do you think the DNC is trying to prove by doing this?
What do I think?
I mean, do you have the answer? Do we know what does the DNC know what they're trying to do by accomplishing this?
Well, what the DNC says versus what.
I got you.
So let's start with what the DNC says.
Okay.
Okay. And we can talk about if that's really where we're at. What the DNC says, right, is that the purpose of a donor threshold and the purpose of scoring at a certain polling average in a number of national surveys, okay, because those are the two requirements to qualify for, and obviously you have to be running on the Democratic ticket. You can't, that hopefully is given, but in case it's not. So those are the three things, I guess. The purpose of the two that deal with numerics in terms of donor threshold and your polling average, the hope is that they're putting people on stage. Again, this is publicly what they're telling us. People on stage that are showing some semblance of having a chance among the populace of becoming president, which, I mean, from a purely logic, that seems reasonable, right? If you have a number of donors and you're polling at a certain percentage, then you have a realistic, even if an outside chance, but a reasonable chance of maybe winning the presidency, right? If you're polling at less than 1% and you've only got 1,000 donors, probably not very likely, right? So that's their reasoning.
That's what they're selling us.
That's what they're selling us, right? That's what they're saying the reason is. Now, do you think that that's the actual reason, Lance, or is there a different reason that
I'm not so sure that that's even the truth.
Okay.
Because the bottom line is if you finish
that's what I mean.
If you finish in the top three in Iowa and New Hampshire, then you probably have a good chance of getting the Democratic nomination. See, I would like to see somebody just say, you know what? I don't want to be in your debates. I'm going to take my $1 million and I'm just going to campaign in Iowa and New Hampshire and not even go to the debates and
see what happens.
Win your stinking primaries. And then all the money's going to come running into me and I'm going to get elected. I don't even need to be on your debate stage. I think that would be a better use of your money. Now, that's what I wanted to say. What's your question? Being a politician there.
I said what I wanted to say.
I said what I wanted to say.
Well, you're not
now,
being a politician because then you asked me to ask you the question again. You wouldn't do that. You'd say, that's my answer.
Well, I just said, well, okay. Well, what's your question?
What do you think the DNC is really trying to accomplish? In other words, is this lip service they're giving us, is that the real reason?
Yes, no. I don't think it is the real reason because as I just explained, whoever comes out of the first two primaries with a running head start typically becomes the Democratic nominee.
So is it just a PR stunt?
I think it totally is. You have to do something to get it down from 20 because let's face it, if you are someone who doesn't want to see President Trump be president, are you really going to not vote for the Democratic candidate in 2020? I mean, I'm throwing that out there. It's not,
let me ask
a little rhetorical then. I mean,
is this all because of Bernie and last time?
I think
this
so.
whole grassroots,
I think it's,
and that's in air quotes there, it's a trendy thing.
Let's face it.
We like grassroots now.
Unfortunately, politicians tend to be followers and not leaders. We want them to be leaders, but they're
What do you
followers.
mean by that? Give me more.
We have to placate, the Bernie people because they feel like the nomination was stolen from them. So now we're going to do something to placate that block of the Democratic Party instead of let's get out front and say, you know what? The past is past. Let's figure out the best way to get the right nominee to defeat the sitting president. So this is, once again, an example of the Democrats screwing up their opportunities to be victorious because they're so worried about making everybody happy. They're missing the real decision of leadership, and that is let's figure out who's got the best chance to defeat the incumbent president in the upcoming election. Instead, let's make all the Democrats feel like it's everybody got an even start here. Let's make them feel that way, which isn't true. Let's make them feel that way, though, because that'll bring us together as a party. So we're trying to solve the last problem instead of looking ahead to what the Democrats need to do to defeat President Trump or President Pence, whichever one happens to be there.
Well, okay, but just to be clear, what you're saying is the DNC is only doing this as a placate.
It's reactionary instead of leadership. Instead of getting out front, it's reactionary to 2016 instead of figuring out what's the best plan for 2020. So why look backwards? Why react to 2016? I don't care about 2016. You lost. Use it to learn from it, and let's go. You didn't lose because you gave the nomination to Hillary instead of Bernie. That's not why you lost the election. We can get into that's another show. So
that's kind of our last bit.
So let's not be reactionary. Let's be forward thinking, and that's what I said. It's not showing leadership on part of the DNC.
Yeah, it seems like a reactionary move. My guess is that in addition to being reactionary, it's mainly public relations, not just placating, but it's also trying to show a semblance of fairness, even to people they know aren't going to vote Democrat right now, because they're hoping to kind of repair the image of, we chose the nominee last time.
Which they do every time.
Well, yeah. Well, but then on the other side, I think you've got this. There was a lot of talk about the RNC trying to circumvent, and choose somebody other than Trump. Now, ultimately, they didn't do that. But that's probably because there wasn't anybody close enough where they could really.
They tried, but the surge of supporters.
Oh, so we're going to chalk it up to. But that's the whole, wouldn't the Republicans have voted for anybody other than Hillary anyway? I think the key was.
Probably.
But not that core that came because of Trump. In other words, that group who's not typically voting at all.
They wouldn't have voted.
Who showed up because of Trump. And that, I think, is what put the nail in the coffin where the RNC said we can't choose somebody else because Hillary, they probably knew ahead of time, Hillary's got the popular vote. We have to win the Electoral College. And if we lose this segment of people who don't usually go vote, then we're going to lose.
Sure.
So we have to go with Trump if we want to win.
Yep.
And again,
the Republicans did what? They chose somebody that could win. They play to win. How many times in the last 7 years have I told you that about the Democrats?
They don't play for morals.
You just said
it.
You weren't trying to, but you just supported my thesis.
My thesis
of the last 7 years. When actually it's the last 50-some years that I've watched this play out.
Well, but being on the program.
But being in the program, yep.
About 8, almost.
Almost?
This November, we're closing in 8 years. So what we're looking at, we've kind of talked about now the trend component, right? And does this accomplish what the DNC's after? I guess what the DNC's after is to, create some sort of public image that they care about the everyman.
An illusion that it's an open, fair system.
Right.
That's what they're after.
I think it sort of accomplishes the illusion, right? It doesn't actually accomplish doing that. It accomplishes convincing some people that they care. On the other hand, and this is what Lance brought up before the show that I think is important to mention for you guys to chew on, the only people that have enough money and the fundraise or have the network, right, to spend the type of money to get their name out there, to get people to support
to get the
them,
small $1 donor,
are wealthy people or people who know wealthy people, right? Because, I mean, there are some people for example, some of these candidates that are under $1 million in annual income, they don't have the money to go out and get all these.
But look at what kind of money they're spending.
Right.
So obviously you have to have the donations from the big money
Exactly.
people or inherently wealthy to spend the money to get your SDDs.
Yeah. It's in other words, I don't think that it doesn't really accomplish it, because you can't do it unless you either know the right people or have the money yourself or both, and then again, so what's the point of the small dollar donors, because if you have to spend $300 to get one, it kind of defeats the whole.
Not really smart economics.
No, it's just this is how we have to play the system, to be on the stage, to do the things the DNC is saying.
Exactly.
So I think it accomplishes the placating component, the public relations component. As far as, does it actually accomplish what the DNC is saying that it accomplishes? No, I don't think so. It doesn't actually do it. It only merely creates an illusion of this effect. So what we're looking at in the last part of the show is kind of what's the alternative to this, and a little bit of analysis in understanding political parties as we go into this election season, because I think it's really important. Small donor thresholds, national polling averages, what does it all mean, and what should you really expect from a political party? Well, we're going to answer that. But before we do, we're going to take a brief moment to hear from one of our sponsors.
We are The State of Us. Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
Small donor thresholds, national polling averages, all requirements to make the stage of a Democratic presidential debate. Yet Donald Trump's spending $4.8 million in the period from May 26th to August 23rd on Facebook ads, and he doesn't need to make the debates. You got all these people spending a lot of money on Facebook and digital media, all in the name, right, of communicating their message to people, or in the name of getting on the debate stage. The question is, what should you really expect from the Republican and Democratic parties? What's the point here, right? We talked a little bit in the last segment about what is the DNC trying to accomplish with these goals. And I think what we established is it's mainly to get people to believe that they care about everyday citizens. And you might say, well, they absolutely should, because we're the ones that make up the party. Well, here's the thing, though, Lance, right? Mm-hmm. Here's the thing. This goes back to this age-old idea that most people, say you voted party line your whole life, okay? Let's just say you've always voted Democrat, hypothetically. You may go tell people, I'm a Democrat. The irony is that in most cases, when people say that, they are not a Democrat. They're not actually, not technically. Even if you have a primary race, like in Ohio, where you have to choose a party's ballot, that doesn't make you a Democrat. You still have to go through the process of being a registered Democrat or Republican, which most Americans never, ever do. Therefore, political parties don't care about the everyday citizen. Why would they? Most of them aren't members of the party. Most Americans aren't members of their parties. So why would they care? Now, maybe they should.
Because they need your vote.
But that's different. Well, do they? Apparently.
Well, they do in the general elections.
That's right.
They don't when it
they
comes
don't care
to,
before that.
They don't care when it comes to picking a slate of people to run for office. They just need your vote in the primaries and in the general election.
In your analysis, Lance, what's the purpose of a political party? Why do they exist?
You can take a whole class on that if you go to
I'm asking you.
If you go to a large enough institution.
Senior historian
I know, but
at
you wanted to sum
TrueChat.
up. But anyway, I won't quit wasting my time here that I have. Basically, it was done to align people with like ideas so that they could win more elections and gain power and control over the government so that they could move the country in the direction that they wanted to move them. There were many questions and many issues that faced the new country. And Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson and some of the people who worked with them decided that it would be best to organize those people with like thoughts and like ideas so that they could come up with a plan to move the country in the direction that they wanted to see the country move. Our initial president under the Constitution, and yes, I did say it that way on purpose, because we had leaders of the United States during the War for Independence that when the Constitution was not in place. So the first president of the United States under the constitutional setup was George Washington. But we had other presidents, if you want to use that term.
Presidents of the Continental Congress, right, and so forth.
But he said, upon leaving the office of the president, that political parties would be the death of the nation. And there have been times in history when many people thought, well, he was right, and we've persevered, and I think we'll get through this rough patch again. But that's why political parties exist. They were just a way for people to organize, to get their agenda, to run the country the direction that they thought the country needed to be run. And it was started as an elitist group, and it's still an elitist group.
And the problem that I see today with the parties is that they're no longer unified around a set of principles and ideas.
Right.
I mean, they share, don't get me wrong.
Well, they give you maybe moral support to those concepts and ideas. They say they are, but they don't follow through at all times.
Well, but you take the Republican
really,
Party.
They just want power.
Right. You take the Republican Party, and today you've got people who may not care at all about social issues and who care about the economics of the country, how large government is, what I would call real Republicans or traditional Republicans.
I think traditional.
Yeah.
I don't like real, but traditional.
Okay.
Meaning the old school Republican.
Lincoln-type Republicans mainly.
No, you can't even go there.
No?
Because Lincoln Republicans were for...
Well, they had social stances, I guess. Well, but so Republicans... That's what
always gets me about, we're the party of Lincoln. Really? Because you really don't do much for minorities, and that was, pretty much what Abe was running on.
Yeah, Democrats were strongly opposed to
Democrats.
Most social
Democrats mostly came from the South, historically. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And Republicans came from the North. And we've seen a flip of that. I mean, if you want to study political party history. And here's the other one again. And I had this today, and it wasn't anything about the show. I was just thinking this morning. Wouldn't you say, and this is from talking to you, Republicans typically have had that idea that they want less government interference, right? They want the government out of people's lives. They
want the federal government out of people's lives.
Exactly. Okay.
Well, that's,
okay. So the federal government, well, that goes into what I want to say anyway.
I'm okay with my local government.
Then why? And I'm just going to, I'm not going to try to open up a can of worms. We can move on. Rhetorical question here for the audience to answer. Why do the Republicans then want to get into the lives of women when it comes to the issue of abortion?
No, had to throw that one.
Because you don't follow. Well, it's not logical.
Well, but that's my point.
If you don't want the federal government to get involved in people's lives.
See, now you're helping make my point for me.
You shouldn't be,
which is that
want the government to decide what the social issues and social standards should be in the country. If you're a Republican, I'm just throwing that out there as a rhetorical question for people to chew on there.
Republicans and Democrats have become hypocritical in the party sense because they no longer share unified sets of consistent ideology. Republicans will say, right, that they're against increasing the national deficit, and then they pass a tax cut that's exactly contrary to that. And, they'll go on to say that we want the government out of your lives, but we're against abortion. And then on the flip side, you'll look at the Democrats and they'll say that we're for the everyman and we care about protecting the workers. And yet the people running the party don't have any idea what it means to be an everyman. They've never been an everyman. They never will be. And they would hate living like an everyman.
Well, because you
they
can't
would
get elected.
Despise living that way.
Because it takes money.
Yeah. But I mean, even the party leaders, people who aren't necessarily they're elected by the party, but you know what I mean? Not running for president or an office. They're running for a position in the DNC.
The power brokers behind the scene.
Right. Even them, So they're selling this illusion that we care about middle-class America and that we're for social change. And there's a lot of them. I mean, for example, many Democrats who paid to get their children admitted to top-tier universities because they couldn't get in on their own merits. That's not the American dream. That's not hard work. That's,
right.
I have the money to make things happen.
That's not equality.
Right. So what I guess I mean is that, and on the same token, right, you've got Republicans who don't care about social issues and care about this stuff. And then you've got Republicans who really care about social issues and don't care about the deficit, obviously. And you've got Democrats who are socialists and would advocate for the entire demise of capitalism as we know it if they could. And then you've got ones on the other side that are near the middle that want, practical advances and changes to capitalism. And Democrats like Hillary Clinton, who were very pro-military, which traditionally, or not traditionally, but in the last 20 years or so is not something that, I guess I don't want to say it's not that Democrats aren't pro-military. They're not pro-using the military to accomplish, their goals and ideals. It's not that they're against people in the military or anything like that. Just they're not often supportive of, well, we're going to send our military to this place to accomplish this goal type of thing. But you look at somebody like Hillary Clinton and that, she didn't play that up very much, but that was one of those things. She was probably significantly more pro send the military places to get stuff done than anybody that I can think of in the last 4 or 5 presidents. Even though many of them sent troops places, they didn't do it because it's like, ooh, I really think this is the right choice. They did it because they felt that was what would satisfy the American people. Which speaks to a whole different leadership issue of, do you do what the people want or do you do what you think the people need? Fun philosophical question. So I don't know. I guess the point, Lance, that part of what you helped make is that the parties are very hypocritical. And that's part of why I think George Washington, part of what he foresaw. The problem being is anytime that you operate in what we operate in, which is basically a 2-party system, you're kind of stuck, because eventually what happens is splinter groups like the Socialists and Tea Party realize the only opportunity they have is to take over a party that already exists.
Well, and I didn't make that point. I just inferred it. And that is that there is no mention of parties in the Constitution. So there's nothing other than laws that somebody, I guess Congress would pass, that puts any kind of parameters on political parties. It's not mentioned in the Constitution. There's no constitutional reason as to why we have 2 parties or 12 parties or 1 party or whatever. It's just something that has evolved in the way we do things.
So stuff to think about, because keep in mind, and we say this a lot on The State of Us, Lance, right? Just because it's the way it's been since you've been alive doesn't mean that that's the way it's always been.
Or the way that it has to stay.
Exactly. It should go without saying it doesn't, because as humans, all humans, Lance and I are as guilty of this as many other people, we use and frame a lot of our understanding around what we've experienced and what we've been through and what we've learned. And so it's very difficult sometimes to step beyond that. But we have to remember we don't have to continue the 2-party system if we don't want to. There's lots of governments all over the world that are coalition-type governments with multiple different parties. And I'm sure at some point Lance and I should and probably will do a show on looking at the pros and cons of going in that direction, because it's not all good and it's not all bad either. It's a trade-off, So let us know your thoughts, because we do care and we are interested in you helping further the conversation. That mission that Lance mentioned before can only be accomplished if you keep us accountable and also provide your input, all of which you can do at thestateofus.org. Lance, we've challenged our current listeners to invite others to tune in. Mm-hmm. And when they're going out and telling friends how to listen, there's a few different ways they can do that, right? There are. You have all kinds of choices. You can go to the website and, the State of Us, and just go in through, however you do that. Okay. Or if you like to listen to podcasts, you can find us on Stitcher, Spotify,
and anywhere Apple Podcasts are found, and also where there's, I guess there's other ways too. Not that I've ever used them, but, I guess that, I usually say where other fine podcasts are found, but I don't want to diss on those people.
All the different places.
I don't want to diss on those podcasts that aren't fine, so I guess you could find podcasts that aren't fine as well.
You can.
And we can do that over again, or I kind of liked it.
For the State of Us on TrueChat in Urbana, I'm Justin T. Weller.
I'm Lance Jackson.
Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Be the change.